everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're going on an amazing adventure back in time to uncover a super clever and a little bit sneaky story from long, long ago. It's a tale about a group of people called the Gibeonites and how they used their wits to survive. Imagine you're living in a time when big, powerful armies are marching through the land. You hear stories about how they're winning every battle, and you start to get really, really nervous. That's exactly how the Gibeonites felt. The Israelites, led by a brave leader named Joshua, were known far and wide. The Gibeonites knew they couldn't fight them and win. So, they came up with a plan, a very tricky plan. Instead of preparing for a fight, they decided to prepare for a performance. They knew the Israelites had a rule. They were told not to make peace treaties with any of their close neighbors. So, the Gibeonites' big idea was to pretend they weren't neighbors at all. They wanted to look like they had traveled from a land that was incredibly far away. To pull this off, they had to be convincing. So, they gathered their oldest, most worn-out clothes. Think of your favorite t-shirt, but 100 times older and full of holes. They put on sandals that were so tattered they were barely holding together. They packed their bags, but not with fresh, tasty food. Instead, they took bread that was old, dry, and even moldy. Yuck! And the bags they used to carry water, which were made of animal skins back then, were cracked and patched up, looking like they'd been used for a very, very long journey. Everything about them screamed, "We've been traveling for weeks and weeks." With their costumes on and their props ready, the Gibeonite messengers set off to find Joshua and the Israelite camp. When they arrived, they looked exhausted and weary. They walked up to Joshua and the leaders of Israel and said, "We have come from a very distant country to ask for a peace treaty with you." The Israelite leaders were a bit suspicious at first. They asked, "How do we know you're really from far away? Maybe you live right here among us." This was a moment the Gibeonites had prepared for. They held up their evidence. "Look at our bread," they said. "It was hot and fresh when we packed it at home, but now look at it. It's dry and moldy from our very long journey." Then they pointed to their patched-up water skins. These were new when we filled them, but now they are old and cracked. And finally, they showed off their clothes and sandals. "See how worn out our clothes and sandals are from the great distance we have traveled." It was a very convincing performance. The Israelites looked at the moldy bread, the tattered clothes, and the weary faces of the Gibeonites. It all seemed to add up. They believed the story. The Gibeonites had told them a tale of a long, hard journey, and it looked completely true. They had successfully created an illusion, a trick to make the Israelites think they were harmless travelers from a faraway land. Now, this is a really important part of the story. Joshua and the leaders of Israel were impressed by the Gibeonites' story and their proof. They saw these tired travelers and felt it was okay to make a deal with them. But they forgot one very, very important step. They forgot to ask God what they should do. They relied on what they saw with their own eyes and what they heard with their own ears. They looked at the evidence, the old clothes, the moldy bread, and made a decision based on that alone. They didn't stop to pray and ask for guidance. So, without checking in with God, Joshua and the leaders of Israel made a promise. They made a covenant, which is like the most serious and important promise you can ever make. They swore an oath that they would let the Gibeonites live and that they would be at peace with them. All the leaders agreed, and the treaty was made. It seemed like a good decision at the time. The Israelites felt they had made a new ally from a distant land, and the Gibeonites were secretly relieved. Their plan had worked, but secrets don't stay secret for long. Just 3 days later, the Israelites were on the move, and they arrived at the Gibeonite cities. And guess what? Those cities were super close. They weren't from a far-off country at all. They were practically next-door neighbors. The Israelites realized they had been tricked. The whole story about the long journey was a complete fabrication. The Gibeonites had fooled them. The people of Israel were not happy. They grumbled against their leaders, saying, "Why did you make a promise to them? We were supposed to clear this land, and now we can't because you made a treaty." But the leaders replied, "We can't go back on our word. We made an oath, a solemn promise in the name of God. We must honor it." In those times, an oath was unbreakable. It was a matter of integrity and keeping your word, especially when God's name was involved. Even though they were tricked, The Israelites knew they had to keep their promise. They couldn't attack the Gibeonites. So, Joshua called the Gibeonite leaders and said, "Why did you deceive us? Why did you lie and say you came from a distant country when you live right here among us?" The Gibeonites answered honestly. They said, "We did it because we were terrified. We heard what your God did for you and how you have been victorious everywhere you go. We were afraid for our lives. We knew we would be destroyed. So we came up with this plan to save ourselves." Joshua understood their fear, but there still had to be a consequence for their deception. He said, "Because you lied to us, you will be under a curse. From now on, your people will serve the community of Israel. You will be woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my God." This meant they would have the job of chopping wood for the altar and carrying water for the temple services. So, the Gibeonites were saved from destruction, but they became servants to the Israelites. They had traded their freedom for their lives. And that's how the Gibeonites became part of the Israelite community, not as equals, but as helpers. It's a fascinating outcome, isn't it? Their clever trick worked, they survived. But their lie also led them to a life of service. The Israelites, on the other hand, learned a huge lesson. They learned the importance of seeking divine guidance before making big decisions. Just looking at the surface of things isn't enough. They had to remember to talk to God and ask for wisdom. This story also shows us how important promises are. Even when the Israelites found out they'd been tricked, they stuck to their oath. Their integrity was more important than getting revenge. Years later, a king named Saul would forget this promise and harm the Gibeonites, which caused big problems for the whole nation. It took another king, David, to make things right again, showing just how long-lasting and serious these covenants were. So, what can we learn from the Gibeonites and their crafty plan? Well, it teaches us that things aren't always what they seem. It's important to look deeper and ask questions. For the Israelites, it was a lesson in discernment, the ability to judge well. They learned that relying only on what you can see can lead you into tricky situations. Pausing to think, pray, and seek advice is always a wise move, whether you're a leader of a nation or just making a decision in your own life. The Gibeonite story is a powerful reminder of how fear can make people do clever things, how lies have consequences, and how important it is to be a person of your word. It shows us that even when people make mistakes, like Joshua did, God can still work through those situations in surprising ways. Thanks so much for listening to this incredible story with me today. It's one of those tales that really makes you think. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures into the past. See you next time, and God bless.